Thank you. Kia ora tātou katoa. Hai nau mai haere mai. A warm welcome to you all. Really appreciate that you're joining us on a Saturday morning for the information session on the Community Refugee Sponsorship Program. My name is Birgit Grafrand Watungwa, and I'm the National Program Manager for Host Aotearoa New Zealand, the umbrella organization for the program. Just before we get started, I would like to open the meeting with a karakia to bring us all into the space together. Tūtaua mai I runga, tūtaua mai I raro, tūtaua mai I roto, tūtaua mai I waho. Kia tau, ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, ui e, tai ki e. It's my great pleasure to also introduce my co-hosts and supporters this morning, the team from Host Aotearoa New Zealand. We've got Edwin Reverol, our program support, Giselle Iradukunda, one of the sponsorship coaches, and Sarah McDonald, the other sponsorship coach. We also have Alice Garner joining us this morning from Immigration New Zealand. Warm welcome to you and a warm welcome to everyone else. The purpose of the meeting really is to give you an introduction about the program. The program is intended, or not the program, the meeting is intended for community organizations or anyone in the community who is interested in the program, might be interested in becoming a sponsor, and other partners in the sector and wider community and globally as well. So lovely seeing you all. So the meeting is not for anyone who is interested in being sponsored in the program and wants to come to New Zealand. So it's more focused on the side of the sponsors and the criteria for the program. We're doing a presentation first, and then we'll allow plenty of time at the end for you to ask questions. Feel free to put them in the chat room. We'll monitor the questions, but you can also ask them at the end. For now, I'll hand over to Sarah to get us started. Thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Birgit. Kia ora koutou. It's lovely to see you all here on a Saturday morning. So I'm going to kick us off with a little bit more of an understanding of the global context of community refugee sponsorship, and then we'll talk a little bit about the national context and then how that feeds into our local context here in Aotearoa. So the development of an alternative pathway for refugee admission, it's the traditional refugee resettlement has gone through quota and family reunification, but over the last few years, there's been a real push to now begin this community sponsorship pathway. And as signatories to international UN conventions of the safety of and the relocation of resettlement of refugees, which New Zealand, we are signatories of those conventions. There are certain signposts that we need to meet, certain sorry, my head this morning. Let me go through the slide. Okay, so protection, durable solutions, international responsibility sharing. These are all things that we need to think about when we are looking at resettling refugees. So the refugee sponsorship category provides an opportunity for community organizations to be more actively engaged in these conventions. So the idea is that it's not only a government responsibility to connect with these conventions, it's also about communities being able to connect with this international responsibility that we all share in protecting those who are seeking safety. So it also enables sponsored refugees to be able to automatically get that support from the community. And it then, the evidence is showing that will lead to a sort of a quicker integration into the communities that they arrive into. It will help them to become self-sufficient, possibly a little bit quicker, and engage in things like the labour market and their communities and their schools with a bit more confidence and quicker than possibly other streams. So it's proving really successful in places like Canada, the States, Argentina, Ireland, and now Aotearoa. We are embarking on seeing how this program can work in our context. So it's very exciting. It's very exciting to see. Now let's have a look at what it could look like, at what it looks like nationally for us. So when we look at community sponsorship with a national lens, we're drawn to our relationship with Te Tiriti o Waitangi. There are a lot of great links with Te Tiriti o Waitangi and actually the principles and the values of the UN conventions. So again, it means that our communities can engage in this international responsibility of sharing, responsibility sharing. If we look at Te Tiriti or Waitangi, we look at partnership, protection, participation. These are all values that we will be bringing in, that come into this program as well. So when we're looking at community practice, again, we can find roots in Te Tiriti or Waitangi, and that's something that will flow through. And when we're looking at it from a local kind of lens, so nationally, there's this sharing of responsibility with the government and these big conventions, global conventions. But then we've got local communities such as yourselves being able to also connect in. And that's when we have, these wonderful values that we work inside in New Zealand that come from Te Ao Māori. There's manaakitanga, whanaungatanga, so that strength of reciprocal mana enhancing relationships that we seek, and kotahitanga, this idea of unity, this idea of sharing and the reciprocal nature of a relationship. These are all things that can be promoted within this program. So yeah, so that's a little bit there about the context. So engaging in this program, it's really engaging in a movement that is happening because there is a global crisis of refugee crisis, and as we are seeing, it's just getting worse by the day. So we are needing, as a globe, to find new ways of resettlement, and this is proving to be a really strong pathway. So let's have a little bit of a look back to maybe the whakapapa of this program in Aotearoa. So there was a 2-year pilot where 24 people came through over 2017, 2018, and they were placed in communities around New Zealand, Nelson, Timaru, Christchurch, Hamilton, I believe. And it was really quite successful. So after that program, after the 2 years was up, there was a co-design process with community organizations who were involved and those who were sort of on the periphery as well. And within that co-design process, there was, this is where the extended pilot, which is what we are now working in, has come from. So building capacity and capability of the approved sponsors came out as something that needed to be built, and creating this idea of a communities of practice, which is this sort of robust information sharing between communities also needed to be created, and this idea that there would be an umbrella organization to be able to hold that space, and that's where Host Aotearoa has come in. So we, and you'll learn a little bit more about Host as we go through the presentation. So getting involved, again, we're looking at the refugee whānau in the center there. Always at the centre are the whānau or the individual arriving in Aotearoa. And as you see, we need to wrap around them with all these different aspects of life in New Zealand. You can see that. The program vision is that we have this 3-year pilot, but obviously we would love to see this as a permanent fixture in New Zealand's resettlement program. You know, we want this to be the complementary pathway to refugee resettlement so that we have another way of bringing people to safety. And that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do. So here we have host, another diagram here. Host, obviously, we will be the connector to support organisations and mana whenua, and obviously MB, INZ, government departments. And then for the refugee, the approved sponsors will be their wraparound. And then we will coach the approved sponsors to make sure that they have everything they need to be able to successfully resettle whānau. And so then you're also, of course, as approved sponsors, drawing on your own links, your own community connections. And if there is a gap, that's where host will help you. That's where host will help you. So it's a whole community approach. So at this point, I will pass you on to Giselle. She's going to give you some of the practical aspects of the program and how you can get involved. Kia ora, Giselle.
Kia ora, Sarah. Thank you all. Kia ora koutou. So my name is Giselle. So in this section, I will be covering the practical logistic stuff that sponsors need to have. So sponsors need to first and foremost, as an organisation, be registered. So they need to be registered, so that can be a faith-based organisation that's registered, that can be a company, can be a business, just anything that's got that legal entity to it. We are also wanting sponsors to have wider community engagement and a community approach. So Sarah talked about your own links that you might have in your own community. So we're wanting to see that reflected in this program. So the other thing is we're wanting you to demonstrate that you have experience working with vulnerable people. So that could be refugees, or that could be any other people that you've worked with in your own community. But I think in this section, we're just wanting you to show a willingness to learn and a willingness to engage in this process. So importantly, financial capacity. So you are committing yourself to the extended pilot for the 2 years. So that's so we need to be able to see that you've got the financial resources to be able to support the resettlement, service for the refugees when they arrive in New Zealand. And then we'll be also asking you to fill in a settlement form. So in that settlement form, you will highlight the ways in which you are going to go about connecting the whānau when they do arrive in New Zealand with service providers, with school, healthcare, and all the other things, as well as securing accommodation. So we want you to be able to deliver what you've outlined in the settlement plan. The other, but most importantly, is that you are willing to go into a deed of agreement for service with Immigration New Zealand. So that is a legal document. Again, committing yourself to supporting supporting financially, or supporting in terms of linking the refugees when they do come to New Zealand. And that will involve reporting back to Immigration NZ, but that will also involve regular meetings and catch up with host Aotearoa as the umbrella organisation, just to make sure that you've got the wraparound services that you need. And Sarah talked a little bit about the community of practice. So that will be an opportunity for you to check in with other sponsoring organisations, talk about challenges, talk about the positives, but do it in a community, community of practice approach where you're learning from one another. So I'll go to the next slide. Yeah, so how to apply. I guess probably the most important thing, what we found that sponsors are struggling with is particularly police vetting. So once you decide your organisation is committed, is going to be a sponsoring organisation, we suggest that you complete the police vetting. So that's done through the police vetting services. So get this done quite early because it does take time for the request to be sent through to you, but we'll work through the logistics stuff with you if you are struggling, host Aotearoa, I mean. The other is, so the organisation, so that's a sponsoring group, so they must complete police vetting as well as complete a course, so an e-learning course, so the fundamentals of child protection, so that we know that you understand the risk of working in this space, and especially the fact that you will come in contact with young people and children, so you must complete the course, so that it's the 8 to 5 people as well. So you don't have to provide a budget, but we would like for you to explain in the settlement plan, or you can add another additional information on how you intend to support the family once they arrive in New Zealand, but also maybe in the pre-arrival stages when you are going to secure accommodation, paying bond, and etc. So the application form is quite simple to fill out, but I'll be able to assist with all of these as well. But I just highlighting that police vetting does take time, and that the 5 to 8 people in the core group must do it, and the child protection course as well. So yeah, in the settlement plan, host will be able to assist from the very beginning to the very end. So that's the settlement plan. So the settlement plan is a generic, so we want it's a generic plan, basically a roadmap on how you intend to help families. So the first section of the settlement plan talks a lot about accommodation, how you intend to find a private rental for the family that is suitable for them, but that's also adhering to the safety home standards and other legislations as well, that you understand that, you know, when the families come, they must come to a good home, basically. So the second aspect of the settlement plan will be talking about your own community connections, so your connections to, for example, Te Tiriti o Waitangi, your local iwi, and just some knowledge around Te Ao Māori, and that you understand that, you know, we're wanting this program to be informed by the principles of the treaty. So the last section of the settlement plan is about, you know, when refugees do come to New Zealand, the logistical stuff. So things like, you know, thinking about welcome packs, what would a welcome pack include? And then also thinking about, you know, schools in your area, health providers in your area, if required, mental health providers in your area, so that you're linking in with all those service providers. And so that's what we're wanting in your settlement plan. Of course, language support as well. If the whānau you are going to sponsor requires that translation or English skills, that you've outlined that in the settlement plan as well. But host Aotearoa will be able to assist throughout this, the writing of the settlement plan. So again, this is a legal document. I talked a little bit about the deed of agreement, and when sponsors commit to the sponsorship program for the extended pilot for the duration of 2 years, As approved sponsors, you are committing to working with host, but also with INZ, so Immigration New Zealand, throughout the duration of the program. But the most important thing we're wanting from this program is that the refugees are at the core and are at the centre. I think Sarah talked a little bit about that manahitanga, that we are extending manahitanga and whanaungatanga. So we want refugees, when they do come to New Zealand, to feel like they've come into a community, to feel like you are equipped as well. You've got the capacity training to be able to deliver some of these services. So things like, you know, enrolling in education. So that's the practical stuff. You know, you've enrolled them into education, provide financial advice to the refugees. So budget services, you've linked in with budget services, or if you've got someone in your group that is able to provide that. You've welcomed the refugees when they arrive at the airport, and most important, that you've ensured that you know, you found a home for them before they arrive, and also that once they're here, that you're linking them with employment. You're linking them with the employment area. So things like, you know, practical stuff like helping them write a CV, helping them put, I don't know, their CV on Seek, or things like that, and just helping them, just basically listening to them and saying, okay, what is your desires and what is your needs, and how can we help you achieve those needs and desires? Yeah, and practical advice, obviously. Again, I talked a little bit about this, so it's not a requirement that you provide a budget, but we would love to see, it doesn't have to be in a budget form, but we would love to see how you intend on supporting the family when they are. Host has designed budget template. Don't feel like you have to use this one. There's lots of other methods of expressing this as well in your own, in your own way. But we just want you, we just want you to know that, you know, this is a commitment, and how will you go about, you know, delivering, you know, what you've committed to financially as well. Next. Yeah, so Sarah talked a little bit about, she talked a lot about the pilot program, so the whakapapa of the whakapapa of this program. So in the pilot program, we had a number of organisations that were a part of that. One of the organisations were Southwest Baptist Church. So this is just a quote from them. Highlight one or two things from them. So one of the challenges were for them that there was not enough capacity training or resources being provided, and so they felt that they were unable to maybe meet some of the needs, and so that's where host is come in. Sarah talked about the gap, so we're just wanting to really kind of shorten that gap and help you and assist you. I guess one of the other positives that came out from them that they've expressed to us is that, you know, it's about that extending manahitanga and whanaungatanga, and building relationships and establishing relationships and building friendships as well. So some of the sponsors are still in contact with the sponsored refugees. So yeah, so just going back to the kaupapa of the program. Next. So I will pass the next section on to Alice, who will be talking about the eligibility side of the refugees. So this is a strictly immigration side of the process. So Alice will,
Got it, Del. Thank you, and apologies in advance for the husky voice. I've got a bit of a cold. So yeah, I think rightly so, the focus of this session is on how to become an approved sponsor, because that's the first phase of the program. Is you do the application and you become, a panel assesses your application, and then I'll get in touch with you and sign a deed of agreement. And then after that phase, we'll kick off the next phase of the process, which is the immigration process. And I'll just give a little bit of an overview. Basically, there's two pathways. One is your organisation can nominate a refugee family, so someone you're already in touch with, that you've been communicating with, that you've met before, and you can put them down as a family who you would like to sponsor. The second option is, if you don't have those relationships with refugees offshore, is you can request to be matched with a family who UNHCR identifies as being a really good candidate for community sponsorship. And the main difference between the two pathways is once you notify us about which pathway, if you're choosing to nominate a family, we will send you the documentation that then you pass on to the refugee family and help them fill out to kick off their immigration application. Whereas if UNHCR is identifying a family for you, they will help the refugee family fill out some of that documentation. But apart from that, the immigration process is the same. They'll have an interview, there'll be an English language assessment and health assessment, security checks, etc. But once you're an approved sponsor, we will have a one-on-one conversation with you to go into this process in a lot more detail. So I might leave it there for now. Can I have the next slide, please? So for the eligibility criteria for refugees for this program, first of all, they need to be mandated as refugees, which is a pretty basic criteria. The second one is that they need to meet the relevant immigration criteria for health assessments, etc. And if you want information about the health assessment, we can provide the form that needs to be filled out. But IOM, we work closely with the International Organization for Migration, and they facilitate the health assessment, so that's nothing that the sponsor needs to do. Secondly, refugees need to be residing in a country that is a UNHCR priority area and an area that INZ resettles from, basically anywhere in the world apart from Europe and Northern America, because there's a lot of other countries who are resettling from those areas, and part of international responsibility sharing is that we share and we resettle from other areas. The other criteria is that the refugees are not eligible to be sponsored under a different INZ family category, including RFSC. And this is because of the complementary nature of this program. It's trying to provide options for refugees who have no other way of coming to New Zealand to be able to come. Next slide, please. And so in addition to those basic refugee eligibility criteria, there's also the principal applicant. So with each family that's being sponsored, one of the applicants will be the principal applicant, and they will need to have a basic understanding of English, and we'll organise for them to undertake an English language assessment as part of the immigration process, and they'll be given the refugee will be given the feedback from that English language assessment so that they come in with a really good understanding of where their English sits in a New Zealand context and what that standard of English will mean for them in order for accessing jobs and kind of integrating within the community. The principal applicant also needs to be aged between 18 and 45 and also have a minimum of 3 years work experience or a qualification requiring 2 years study, sorry. And if they don't have evidence of that, because understandably in many refugee contexts, you can't flee with that kind of documentation, they can fill out a statutory declaration saying, this is my background, this is my experience, and I confirm that this is accurate. So yeah, there's a bit of flexibility around the types of evidence that you need to provide to meet these criteria, because we really understand the practicality of the situation. I think that's all. Yep, cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Alice. Sarah, can you go to the next slide? So I just want to really quickly talk about the organization. You've heard Host Aotearoa New Zealand mentioned a few times. So just want to quickly talk about our role before we then open up the session for questions. Host Aotearoa New Zealand is part of the Host International family that supports refugees and displaced people across Australia, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and New Zealand. And we work specifically with refugees and wider host communities. And so this program is a fantastic example of that work that we do to support individual and community well-being and influence global change. Our role in the program, we're the umbrella organization for the Community Refugee Sponsorship Program for the duration of the extended pilot. And as Sarah had already mentioned earlier, that came out of the initial pilot program, that the organizations that were part of that really wanted someone as a go-to organization that could support them throughout the journey of the Community Refugee Sponsorship Program. And our role is to coach, support, and work alongside initially interested and potential sponsorship organizations. And once they decide to apply, we'll support them through that program and that process, while we're also providing resources and training. Sarah, I think there's one more slide on that. So as we already said, we can walk alongside organizations throughout the whole application process on a one-on-one basis. So we're offering these information sessions, of course, to all interested parties. And then if you have an organization that might be interested in exploring if this is something they want to do, get in touch with us and we can then work alongside you to answer any more specific questions and walk through the process with you that Giselle outlined earlier on. If you are approved as a sponsor organization, we then continue working alongside you first during that pre-arrival phase in preparation for the arrival of the refugee family, but then also continue working alongside you and the sponsored refugees when they arrive for the whole duration of those 2 years. And as was mentioned previously, we're really building a community of practice among approved sponsors so that sponsors can also support each other and work alongside each other, that we're working alongside with additional resources and support and coach you through that process, always with the view of making the settlement of the refugee families a real success for those families, and they have Turanga Waiwai by the end of it. They have that sense of belonging and they have a place to stand within the community that they're resettling in. Right, time for questions. So really feel free to ask any questions and put them in the chat, or feel free to ask the question. If there are any questions we don't get to in the session, we can always follow them up later on and put the answers on our website.
So Birgit, we have a question here from Pramila talking about, asking about refugee families and if they are, if they're resettled in Tauranga, they're interested in becoming a sponsorship organisation and are wondering how many refugee families can centres like Tauranga expect in a year.
Great, I'm happy to start answering that. So there is no specific number that goes into specific centres. So it's very different to the quota refugee program that communities know who's coming into their region on an annual basis that are resettled through the quota refugee program. In this program, it's really about what number of sponsorship organizations we may have in the regions. So our role is really to look at organizations across the whole country and support the organizations within each of those regions who may be interested in sponsoring and how many families they want to sponsor within their city or their region. So there's no specific target number for regions. This is really driven by interests from community organizations and the success of becoming approved sponsor organizations in those regions. Alice, is there anything you would like to add to that?
Just that for this extended pilot, there's which runs until the middle of 2024, there's 150 places for refugees in this extended pilot. So that, and we are hoping to get a diverse range of sponsors and also to be resettling refugees in a diverse range of areas, just so that at the end of this pilot, when we write to the Minister about how successful it is, we can say, you know, there was interest across the entire country and in these different areas. And so that is one of the goals of the extended pilot, is to get people resettled across different areas.
That's great, yeah. And it was also worth noting, Pramila, that Tauranga or the Bay of Plenty is not a place traditionally resettled by the quota. So it'd be great if we had you apply from Tauranga.
Absolutely. I just wanted to say, would love to have
awesome.
some organizations in your region. So if your group is
Please
interested,
get in touch. Yeah, that would be wonderful.
And Birgit, thank you very much. Thank you.
Kia ora, Pramila. Great.
Welcome.
That's great. So we have another question here. If a community is willing to sponsor, but due to some limitations is not approved, can it sponsor under an approved community? So can there be a partnership? I think is that question, Birgit?
yes, absolutely. So that's again where we can support as the umbrella organization to talk to you in terms of what you think your the skills, experiences, and the resources that you have in your organization. And there's a real interest also in the extended pilot to see if we can get some partnerships working in this program as well. We already have some organizations that are working in a partnership with another organization, or where we have one organization as what we would then be the legal entity that others come under as well. So we have different different setups at the moment. So would be really keen to talk to you some more about that and see how we can connect you with other organizations, or if you have other organizations in your region, what others have done. They've talked to other organizations that they know and then have come together to work together.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just need to have one of the organizations. If there's a partnership of two organizations, or if there are more, one of these organizations just need to act as the legal entity that the others come under. So that legal entity would be the one that then signs the deed of agreement for services with Immigration New Zealand. But those are the kinds of details we can talk to you in your individual circumstances.
That's great. So this I'm seeing that Michaela is also in Tauranga, and Pramila and Michaela have just connected over our chat. So there you go. That's good. And the next steps and there was a question there from Michaela, you know, how would we go about the next steps after today? Please just contact host. We have also the sponsorship, the application forms, and the settlement plan forms that are all on our website. So have a look at our website, but also feel free to contact us, and we will get you on the road to begin your
absolutely
journey.
Usually I have the first chat with the organizations to see what support you need, and if you then decide that you want to proceed, one of the community sponsorship coaches will be assigned to your organization. So either Sarah or Giselle, and one of them will then be your go-to person for any questions and to support you throughout that whole process. So it will be fantastic to hear from you. We've got the contact details on the next slide as well.
Fantastic. So Herman has asked a question regarding, you know, if refugees are eligible under Tier 2, but considering Tier 2 applications have never been opened for a long time. Can they be considered in this process? Unfortunately, the answer is no at this stage. If somebody is eligible, well, Alice, do you want to answer that? Hey, yeah.
Yeah, I'll tackle this one. Yeah, good question. We are very aware of some of the issues around the refugee family support category, and you'll know that the government recently announced to double the number of people coming in under that, so hopefully they can work through the backlog of applicants and get that Tier 2 open. The community sponsorship program, because of its additional and complementary nature, it isn't aimed at being a family reunification category. It's aimed at providing that opportunity for refugees who don't have family in New Zealand, wouldn't qualify for quota to have an opportunity to resettle here as well. And in that sense, people who would be eligible, a family in New Zealand would be eligible under Tier 2, they won't qualify for this program. Yeah.
Thank you, Alice. Great. So another question, approximately how long is the process from application being made to a family arriving? And maybe Alice, you'd like to also tackle this one.
Yeah, it's good. It's very good questions. And unfortunately, I can't give an exact date or a time frame. Approximately, it takes, we have the application, the assessment panel meets every 3 months. So once your application is assessed by the assessment panel, we'll get in touch really quickly to kickstart that next phase of sending you the deed of agreement, getting that signed. And then it's basically down to when you let us know when you've got refugees that you'd like to nominate, or you let us know about the UNHCR identified pathway. Then from that stage to the refugees arriving, we're approximately saying about 6 to 9 months. But that's massively caveated with, depends where the refugees are coming from. It depends if there's delays in them being able to submit documentation, do parts of the assessment, if there's delays on the country where they're currently residing, opening the borders to let people out. So we're saying 6 to 9 months, but we can't give you a definite. The one thing I can say is you'll be given an immigration officer pretty early on in the process that you'll be, and I'll as well be in touch with you to keep you updated about where the refugee is at and what stage of the immigration process, so that you'll know how things are progressing. And also, we won't book flights until we have a chat with you about when the accommodation will be ready. So we're not going to create a situation where you're paying for rent month on month on month as you wait for the process. Neither are we going to have the situation where refugee families arrive and the housing is not ready. So we'll try and align the flight with the availability of accommodation really closely. So yeah, hope that answers your question.
Kia ora, Alice, that's cool. At this stage, I don't see that there are any other, has anybody else got any questions that you want to just throw into the chat?
Or as we have a bit of time, feel free to ask the question if
You can
you
unmute
prefer.
yourself and ask the question.
Hello.
Hi.
I have a
Joan.
question.
Yep.
Hello. I put my question in the chat. Did you see it?
I didn't see that, Joan. No. Would you like to just tell us?
Yes.
No?
I've been in touch with Edwin, and he's the one who told me about this meeting. Hello, Edwin. What it is, the situation is, I have been helping asylum seekers for many years, and I teach ESOL to refugees and migrants. And we are been in touch with an Afghan family in Kabul. And I won't go into the long story, I'll make it very short. But basically, the oldest daughter has been going to university for a couple of years studying to be a dentist. And now, because of the Taliban, she cannot go anymore. The oldest daughter, the second oldest daughter took her exams to go into university and turned out to be one of the highest in the whole country. And she was going to go in to study to be a doctor. And now she's stuck at home and cannot go to school. And they also had to basically escape from one part of Afghanistan to another because the Taliban wanted the oldest daughter to be their temporary wife. So basically they've been persecuted. They need to leave Afghanistan. And I'm just wondering if there's any groups, organizations that are going to be sponsoring, would be interested in this family. They're a lovely family. I've spoken with them quite often. The daughters speak very good English. They really they're really just stuck there. And they have 5 daughters, mother, father, 5 daughters, and a little son who's about 3. So I'm happy.
Kia ora, Joan, for your
What's that?
korero. kia ora, and thank you for your kōrero, and thank you for laying that out. I'm a little bit conscious of their security and the amount of information we share in a public space. But
Yes.
thank you, Joan, for
No,
for
I mean,
that question.
he's given permission for me to share that.
No
Yeah.
worries, Joan.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that's
all good.
something for Alice.
Alice, would you like to answer that? Because there's been quite a bit of communication with our whānau, Afghan whānau in Aotearoa. And so Alice will have a
Sure. Thank
answer
you,
for that.
Joan. We do receive countless emails every day from appeals from around the world, including from Afghanistan. I think the difficulty with the nominated pathway, we really are looking for sponsors who have that longer connection with a family, someone who they already know, they're already in touch with, and that they're bringing out because they have that former connection. I think if you're interested in sponsoring, I would encourage you to do so, to sponsor this family, work with a partnership in doing so. But I would like to just mention that one of the basic conditions of being a refugee is that you're outside your country of origin. And when we talk about being a mandated refugee, you need to be outside your country of origin with either UNHCR documentation or registration with your host government to show that you are a refugee and that you've fled and seek protection. So yeah, that's the criteria for this category, but I would encourage you to explore partnerships in New Zealand to help these people that you're obviously really closely in touch with. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
And Joan, if you were interested in connecting to a organisation group, Birgit, maybe we could maybe further that conversation, Joan, after this session. Yeah.
Great.
There's a question on the minimum financial requirement, and that's a really good question. And it's one that we've cautiously haven't answered or raised in the information session, because it's a very difficult one to answer, because it really depends on the circumstances of the sponsoring organization in terms of what resources you may have available within your organization in terms of potential in-kind donations, in-kind support. For example, someone said earlier that, you know, if you have someone who provides ESOL classes and is happy to do some pro bono work, or so it's very difficult to say what the costs might be in terms of sponsoring a family. It also depends on the needs of the family. I think a rough figure I can mention is, because that came out of the initial pilot, that they budgeted for around 8,000 to 15,000. But again, that was really dependent on the number of family members they were sponsoring and the needs, as well as other in-kind support they had locally. So that's a difficult one to answer, and that's why we've created that budget template to help you really work through what you think it might cost you. And again, we're here as well to answer any of the questions.
There's another question here around the cost of the flights. Alice?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, INZ does pay for the flights of the refugee families to get to New Zealand. We also pay for the medical assessment and the English language assessment. So basically the immigration process. And then we'll coordinate with you about arrival times so that you're able to meet the refugee family at the airport and provide that welcome immediately, which will be, really lovely. Lovely way to arrive.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Alice, that the refugees that arrive, they don't go through the Mangere Refugee Resettlement Center. They come straight into the community with your support. So as the sponsoring organization, that's part of your settlement plan. Your part of your planning is who's going to be the one or one or two people or a group of people who welcome them from at the airport and then take them to their new home, which is when that welcome and that orientation then gets started. But that's a lot of detail. We can talk to you later on.
Yeah, there's another question here. Tina is asking, can our organization go through the process to grow our capacity and capability? Tina, are you there? Would you like to expand on that question? Maybe if you take yourself off mute.
Okay, so we're just a small team of 5.
Yep.
So, and also we have some issue with our iwi that they would rather house their own before any refugees come into our town.
Yep.
So the process to start building our capacity and get the training and get others to join, work out the financials. We have a good collaboration with most organisations here.
Great.
And as well within our team in terms of education. We've do these refugees not qualify for ESOL classes with English language partners?
That's a good point. So
yeah.
That is then again, thank you for that question. So firstly, I think, yeah, you've raised a really good point around their capacity and capability. And so absolutely, that's something we can work through with you to identify, you know, what skills and experiences you currently have and connections you have in the wider community. And we are then there as well to support you to build on that. And as we said, you know, we'll be happy to support you with information, resources and training as well. And in terms of the English language provision, of course, absolutely. That again comes back down to the knowledge that you have as a local organization in terms of what may be available to the refugees. And so again, that's why it's quite difficult to estimate costs. Of course, with organizations such as English language partners or other ESOL providers, many of the centers have online classes now. So if there's no center directly in your city or town, you know, the refugees could be connected into online classes. But there may still be some regions that there's a cost to ESOL provision depending on what services are available within that region. But absolutely, those are the kinds of things we draw on your expertise of what's available within your region. And we're here to support that as well with our connections that we have across the country.
And because of the amount of time between, you know, a whānau or an individual arriving, there's plenty of time to then go and build that capacity. We do the sort of stuff that you might be looking at is, you know, we'll have a training on trauma-informed approach. We'll have training on cultural competencies, and that sort of stuff. And then any other gaps that might be there, if we can't, you know, we don't have the expertise, we'll find that for your group. Yeah.
So I guess the question is, if we was to sign up as an organisation and go through all the training, everything, are we obligated at the end, or do we need to provide the financials right at the beginning?
Once you sign the deed of agreement, Birgit, would you like to answer that, Birgit? Or
yeah, so throughout the application process, you don't need to have the finances available at the time. You just need to outline either how you're going to fundraise, or if you already have money tagged that you would like to use for the program. And again, because there will, if you then approved as a sponsoring organization, there will be that time frame where the next process really kicks off with immigration, and then working with the refugees offshore on their immigration process. And as we said, that might take quite a few months to go through that process. And so that's then the time when you can do fundraising, or, you know, whatever plans you had put in place to raise your funds, and then get ready for the arrival of the refugee. So there's plenty of time within those few months. So we don't want you to feel you have to start fundraising now for the application, because it's probably more important you go through the application process first, but you have a good plan in place in terms of how you then want to raise those funds.
There is a commitment through the application process, though, and that you know, signing the deed of agreement with immigration is that commitment.
On our team, our past president runs his own immigration support, plus he's ex-teacher, plus he's our fund applicant. I'm just, in my mind, just popped in, like, we've got some COVID response funding, and we can chuck some of that into education. So it's if your guys' training is free, We're also updating our policies and procedures, so definitely we can add and include in vulnerable children there.
Yep.
Awesome, Tina.
And we're
And again, that
registered for
yeah,
police vetting, and so we just need to grow, and so to know all the steps by going through your organisation would be really
absolutely.
good.
Yeah. So I think that's probably the one thing that's coming out of these questions is really get in touch with us so we can work with you on your individual situation, because as you can see, every organization is different, every region is different, and we can then work through the steps with you and support you in whatever way we can and coach you through that process as well. I'm mindful of time.
Yep.
And so I think we'll wrap it up. Really appreciate that you joined us today. And I know there are probably a lot more questions, and we just look forward to hearing from you. Just before we close, I just want to wrap up the meeting with a closing karakia. Kua mutu o mātou mahi, mo tēnei wā, manakitia mai mātou katoa, o mātou koa, o mātou whānau, aio ki te auranga. Noho ora mai e te whanau. Go well, everyone. Have a lovely weekend. Really appreciate you joined us this Saturday morning, and we really look forward to hearing from you and to answer any more of your questions. As Butoi had asked earlier, following the information session early next week, we'll send you a link to the recording and the presentation as well. And if there are any further questions, we can answer them then as well. Ka kite, thank you so much.